In less than an hour, Earth's top leaders were dead like presidents, secretary generals, key military officials across the globe. None survived. The coordinated assault was devastating, a masterstroke in alien strategy that left the human race leaderless, stunned, and vulnerable. General Thomas Reynolds stood in silence as he watched the news unfold on the holographic display in front of him. Images of burning buildings, of emergency teams pulling bodies from rubble, flashed across the screen. The grim faces of the news anchors struggled to mask their shock as they delivered the unfathomable truth. Earth's leadership had been decapitated in one night. The world had never seen an attack like this. Reynolds' jaw clenched. He had expected something like this, but not so soon, not with such lethal efficiency. The alien coalition, the Zenith Accord as they called themselves, had made no secret of their hostility toward humanity. They viewed Earth as a rising threat, a species too dangerous to leave unchecked. And now, they had made their move. Reynolds knew this attack was meant to shatter Earth's will, to destabilize humanity before it could defend itself in the galactic arena. But they had underestimated humanity. As Reynolds left the war room, his heavy footsteps echoed down the cold steel halls of the underground command center. He passed soldiers and aides, their faces pale, their eyes filled with questions they didn't dare ask. They didn't know the full extent of Earth's contingency plans. They didn't know about the Boogeyman. Reynolds did. He reached a secure elevator and descended deep into the heart of the complex. The air grew colder, the walls thicker. His mind was racing, calculating the next steps, weighing the consequences of what he was about to unleash. For years, the Boogeyman had been nothing more than a myth, a whispered secret among the highest ranks, a final resort, humanity's darkest contingency plan, designed for moments like this. In the control room, the flickering glow of monitors cast long shadows. Standing at attention was Captain John Marston, one of the few men who had ever been briefed on the Boogeyman program. Marston was a soldier through and through, a man with a reputation for getting the job done, no matter how impossible. His presence alone was a testament to the severity of the situation. "Is it time, General?" Marston asked, his voice steady but edged with anticipation. Reynolds met his gaze. "It's time." Marston nodded, no questions, no hesitation. He understood what this meant. The Boogeymen were not soldiers in the traditional sense. They were something far more terrifying, handpicked from Earth's most elite operatives. The Boogeymen had been trained not just in combat, but in psychological warfare. They were designed to break their enemies from within, to be the nightmares that haunted the darkest corners of every alien race's collective psyche. "They killed our leaders," Reynolds continued, his voice cold and measured. "They think they've broken us, but they don't know what we've kept in reserve." Marston's expression remained stoic, but a flicker of something, perhaps grim satisfaction, crossed his eyes. He had been waiting for this. The Boogeymen weren't deployed lightly, but when they were, it meant war in its purest, most brutal form. "How many do we send?" Marston asked. "All of them," Reynolds replied without hesitation. "We need to send a message that will echo across the stars." Marston nodded once more before turning to the control panel. With a few quick keystrokes, he began the activation protocols. The Boogeymen, long dormant, would soon be awakened. Each one had been stationed in deep cover assignments across the galaxy, prepared for this very moment. They would strike without warning, without mercy, leaving nothing but terror in their wake. As the final command was entered, Reynolds allowed himself a moment of reflection. He had always known this day would come, but now that it was here, a cold weight settled in his chest. The Boogeymen were not just a weapon. They were a force that, once unleashed, could never be fully controlled. Their mission would not be to simply eliminate the alien assassins. They would dismantle entire civilizations, sowing chaos and fear so profound that even the thought of attacking Earth again would seem like suicide. Reynolds turned to leave, his thoughts heavy with the knowledge of what was about to happen. As he reached the door, he stopped and looked back at Marston. "Make sure they understand," Reynolds said, his voice low and full of gravitas. "Make sure they know who sent them. Marston's response was a grim smile. "Oh, they'll know." The first strike came without warning. On the distant world of Zather Prime, a thriving metropolis blinked out of existence in the dead of night. The alien city had stood as a beacon of strength for the Zenith Accord. Its towering spires, glistening with technology and military might, were a testament to the Empire's power. But now, only silence remained. The Boogeymen had arrived. Captain John Marston led the assault, cloaked in darkness. His team moved like wraiths through the streets, unseen and unheard. Their mission was not to kill every alien soldier in sight. That would be too simple. Instead, they focused on the heart of the city's infrastructure. Power grids were dismantled with surgical precision, communication towers crumbled, and key political leaders disappeared, never to be seen again. The Boogeymen left no traces, only confusion and fear. Marston watched from a distance as the chaos unfolded. He could hear the desperate cries over his comms. The once unshakable Zathrans, now shouting incoherent orders, scrambling to understand the enemy they couldn't even see. His team moved with eerie calm, dismantling an entire society in hours without engaging in open combat. This was their specialty, to make their enemy feel helpless, hunted by a force they couldn't comprehend. "This is only the beginning," Marston said to himself, the weight of his actions pressing against his chest. For a moment, he let his mind wander back to Earth. He had been bred for war, trained in its many forms, but this was different. This wasn't war. It was psychological destruction. Captain, his second-in-command, Lieutenant Markson, interrupted his thoughts. "We've completed Phase 1. Orders." Marston's jaw tightened. "Pull back. Let them stew in it for a while. We want the fear to set in," as the Boogeymen vanished into the night. Leaving the alien city in ruins, the psychological warfare began to ripple outward. Within hours, reports from Zather Prime spread to the other planets in the Zenith Accord. No one knew who or what had struck the city, only that an invisible enemy had crippled one of their most vital worlds without a single recorded confrontation. The rumors of the Boogeymen began to grow, whispered from system to system. Entire alien civilizations were gripped with terror. On the industrial hub of Kralos 7, laborers abandoned their posts, fearing the shadows around them. On the military stronghold of Tyrones, alien officers refused to sleep, suspecting the Boogeymen lurked in every corner. The once proud Zenith Accord began to fracture under the weight of a threat they couldn't fight, couldn't reason with. Fear spread faster than any physical attack could. Back on Earth, General Thomas Reynolds watched the results of the Boogeymen's operations with grim satisfaction. Every report that came in confirmed what he had expected. The aliens were falling apart from the inside. "They thought they could break us," Reynolds said quietly, his eyes fixed on a hollow map of the galaxy, dotted with the symbols of the Accord's crumbling worlds. "But they don't know the meaning of terror." Yet not everyone on Earth shared Reynolds' conviction. Kevin Jones, a member of the Civilian Oversight Committee, had been monitoring the Boogeymen's activities with growing unease. He strode into the command center, his face set in a hard line. "Reynolds, this has gone too far," Jones said, his voice sharp. "We're not just retaliating. We're destabilizing entire civilizations. We're turning their societies into rubble." Reynolds didn't look up. "That's the point, Jones. They killed our leaders. They declared war. We're simply showing them the consequences." Jones's frustration boiled over. "This isn't war anymore. This is annihilation. We're becoming the monsters they said we were. You really think this is how we win?" Reynolds finally turned to face him, his expression cold. "This is how we survive." As the two men stared each other down, across the stars, Marston and his team prepared for their next mission. The alien world of Phyrexin was next on their list, a planet known for its unwavering loyalty to the Zenith Accord. The Phyrexian leaders had vowed to stand against humanity no matter the cost. They would soon discover the price of such defiance. Marston's team touched down on the outskirts of the capital city. The atmosphere was tense, every building fortified, every street patrolled. But the Boogeymen did not attack head-on. Instead, they slipped into the underbelly of the city, targeting the power structures that kept the planet running. It was the same method: dismantle, disrupt, and leave them in the dark. Within hours, Phyrexin was in chaos. Political leaders went missing, power grids failed, and entire neighborhoods descended into panic. The Boogeymen didn't need to fire a single shot. Fear did the work for them. Marston watched as the Phyrexians turned on each other, their resolve crumbling in the face of an enemy they couldn't see. But as he observed the mayhem, a strange feeling gnawed at him. This was their mission, but was this what victory looked like? Whole worlds were being reduced to madness and ruin, and yet something felt off. Marston pushed the thought aside. He couldn't afford doubt. Not now. Captain, Markson's voice crackled over the comms. Phase 2 complete. They're tearing each other apart down there. Marston nodded, though his chest felt heavier than before. Good. Fall back. We move to the next target. As the Boogeymen disappeared into the void once more, the galaxy was left to grapple with the horror they'd unleashed. Whole alien civilizations were beginning to collapse, not from any grand invasion, but from the fear that now infected every corner of their societies. The galaxy shuddered under the weight of the Boogeymen's reign of terror. Civilizations that once stood proud were now fractured remnants of their former selves, their citizens gripped by fear and paranoia. The Zenith Accord was unraveling, one world at a time, and the ripple effects of that chaos were felt even on Earth. On Phyrexin, chaos erupted in the capital. Marston and his team had executed their plan flawlessly, but the consequences were far more catastrophic than he had anticipated. As Marston watched from a concealed vantage point, the streets erupted in violence. Citizens turned on their leaders, their neighbors, and even their families, mistrust eating away at their cohesion. He had anticipated fear, but not this level of devastation. Captain, Markson said, his voice tense over the comms, the situation is escalating. We need to extract now. Marston hesitated, his gaze fixed on the chaos. I know, but we have to make a statement. They need to understand that resistance is futile. The distant sounds of screams and explosions echoed in his mind, mixing with a gnawing doubt that had begun to invade his thoughts. This was not the noble struggle he had envisioned when he joined the ranks of the Boogeymen. Instead, it felt like a massacre, like humanity was losing its soul amid the bloodshed. Sir, Markson pressed, urgency lacing his words. We can't stay here. We're becoming part of the problem. Before Marston could respond, the comms crackled with static, then fell silent. The next moment, a flare of blinding light illuminated the sky above Phyrexin, followed by a deafening explosion. Marston's heart raced as he turned to see a massive structure, once a symbol of Phyrexian pride, collapsing under an unseen assault. Fall back! Marston barked, instinct taking over. His team scrambled to regroup, but as they moved through the streets, Marston was haunted by the faces of the terrified citizens. In their eyes, he no longer saw enemies. He saw desperation, chaos, and helplessness. He knew they weren't just collateral damage. They were victims of a war that was becoming increasingly unrecognizable. Back on Earth, Reynolds sat in the command center, the glow of screens reflecting in his steely gaze. Reports flooded in about the chaos on Phyrexin, but instead of satisfaction, he felt a creeping unease. The Boogeymen were achieving their goals, but at what cost? He had envisioned a message sent loud and clear to the Accord. Humanity would not be broken. Instead, they had become the very thing they sought to destroy. Jones burst into the command room, his face flushed with frustration. General, you need to see this. He gestured toward the screens, where footage from Phyrexin displayed the spiraling violence. The Boogeymen's handiwork was evident, but so too was the deep-seated chaos left in their wake. What have we done? Jones asked, his voice low but charged with emotion. This isn't a victory. This is slaughter. Reynolds' jaw clenched. We're securing our future. The Accord must understand the consequences of their actions, or we're setting a precedent for annihilation. Jones countered, his voice rising. This is spiraling out of control. If we continue this path, we will lose what makes us human. In the chaos of Phyrexin, Marston's team finally reached their extraction point, adrenaline pumping through their veins. As they ascended to the ship, Marston couldn't shake the haunting images of the panicked crowds, the innocent caught in a conflict that had never been theirs to bear. "Captain," Marston said, his voice steady but low, "are we really fighting for humanity anymore?" Marston's heart sank. The question echoed like a death knell. "We're fighting for survival. Are we?" Marston shot back. "Or are we just becoming another monster in the dark?" Before Marston could answer, the ship's ramp closed, sealing them inside. As the engines roared to life, he looked out one last time at the burning city below. It felt as though a part of him was left behind in the ruins. As they ascended into space, a flicker of movement caught Marston's eye. A small group of Phyrexians had emerged from the shadows, standing defiantly in the debris, their eyes filled with a mixture of anger and sorrow. In that moment, Marston saw a reflection of humanity's struggle, the defiance of the oppressed, the fight for survival against overwhelming odds. He turned away, torn between the satisfaction of their mission and the haunting realization of its cost. In the silence of the ship, Marston made a vow to himself. He would find a way to end this cycle of destruction, to redefine what it meant to be human in the face of such darkness. Back on Earth, Reynolds received a message indicating that some factions within the Accord were beginning to respond, drawing lines for an inevitable retaliation. The tide was shifting, and soon, humanity would have to confront not just the alien threat, but the darker shadow they had unleashed upon the galaxy. As the ship flew away from Phyrexin, Marston's mind churned with thoughts of what lay ahead. The real battle had just begun, and the price of unleashed darkness was steep. With fear now the universal currency of the cosmos, humanity stood at a crossroads, facing an uncertain future.